Okay, we're finally in my worst 20 films of 2016. My number 20 is another January film, is a sequel to a film that I thought was meh, and now they've made something even worse. And it is Ride Along 2. Essentially, pretty much similar to the other Ride Along film, almost to a T, just slightly different details. But that's kind of fine. A lot of sequels are like that, but for this film, it feels lazy, and it feels like every little thing it borrows from the first one is done a little worse. Now, there are some moments that I did find genuinely funny, and there are some moments that is a little thrilling, so it excels in a little bit of the action comedy. But for the most part, it dragged on and just felt dumb, and all the negatives outweigh the positives. If you really enjoyed Ride Along, then maybe you'll like Ride Along 2. If you're not into movies that do the same thing, just a little bit lazier and with a little less quality, then you're probably going to hate Ride Along 2. My number 19 is the other Scott Eastwood movie that came out this year, and this might have actually been a straight-to-DVD film. I don't know how many theaters actually did play this. It is Mercury Plains. Honestly, thinking back, I barely remember anything about this film. I should have watched my review before doing this countdown. I don't remember anything about it. I just remember giving it 1 star. That's all I remember. Sorry, I can't help you there. My number 18 is another movie I don't quite remember all that much, and it is Mojave. I remember Oscar Isaac being in it. I like him. I remember it was a thriller, or it had a thriller premise to it, with a doppelganger and all these thriller elements. But for the most part, it was trying to be an art piece, and there is deep meaning in it. I can see what kind of meaning it's trying to infuse into this movie, but it does it in a way that's kind of boring, and there's a lot of philosophical talk and a lot of mumbo-jumbo that doesn't quite work for the movie it's trying to be. It feels like it's trying too hard to be smart, to be art, to be something that is very meaningful, and unfortunately the thriller aspect itself is kind of dull and sometimes quite boring. I think all the acting is good, and I think there is potential in it, but for some reason it just didn't quite work. My number 17 is the only in-depth review I have done on this channel so far, mainly because I was comparing and contrasting it to the original. Yes, it's a remake, and it's Cabin Fever. I can't believe this movie didn't even make my top 10. This is like a word-for-word, shot-for-shot remake of a film with a little bit of difference here and there. There are some aspects of this film that are better than the original. Some of the gore factor, some of the horror elements of the film, some of the scenes shot in a different way. But overall, the original is just hands down better, or at least I feel that way. I really like the original. I don't like this one all that much. In fact, some of the changes it does have in the movie are a little baffling and a little weird. And even though it tries to have some humor in it, just like the original did, most of the time it either fails, falls flat, or doesn't feel like it's meant to be humorous at all. Instead, it feels a little bit like a bland version of the original, with better effects and some really questionable changes. So basically, I don't see too much reason for this movie to exist. Now, my number 16 is going to surprise a few people, because many of the people that have seen this movie or have heard about this movie is among their top 10 or sometimes worst film of the year. Is only my number 16. I found 15 films worse than this. My number 16 is 9 Lives. It's the Shaggy Dog, but with a cat, and with Kevin Spacey, and ridiculousness. The reason why I have it higher on my list is because most of the movie feels like it's so bad it's hilariously fun. The whole ending, the whole last act alone, just had me dying of laughter because of how ridiculous and stupid it is. Some of the CGI effects and the green screen of this film is just, what? Is this really in theaters? What the heck am I watching? watching? So yeah, I easily feel this is a movie so bad it's good, so bad it's ridiculously hilarious. But at the same time, it is insultingly so. Because you question, this movie actually was made. This movie actually came out in theaters in 2016. Plus, I have to say, there's at least one, maybe even two scenes in this entire movie that I genuinely like. And that is a lot better than a lot of the movies below 9 Lives. Because there's at least 5 movies on this list. My number 5 worst films of this year had nothing that I liked about them. So my number 15 in the worst films of 2016, well, it's another horror film, a very cheaply made one, with very little redeemable qualities in it whatsoever. It is Bleed. There is some interesting premises in here. If done right, it could be good. There are a few things that I found were okay. Generic, but okay. But for the most part, it is just dull, no horror in it whatsoever, nothing that was scary or frightening. We have a Rob Zombie-like ghost in this movie. Yeah, the ghost, whenever it showed itself, it reminded me of Rob Zombie. And whenever I saw that thing, I just said, that's not scary. Not when I'm watching a movie. Maybe if it was in real life, it would be scary. But not watching a movie. It's not scary. Heck, they even have a moment in this where you find out Rob Zombie Ghost is actually good and is helping them. Yet, in the movie, he did kill one of the characters without any reason. So if he's really the protector, if he's really a good ghost, then why did he kill a person earlier on in the film? There's a lot of stupid stuff in this movie, and it's pretty bad and boring, and you might not want to waste your time with this. My number 14, I believe, is an adaptation to a James Patterson thing. No, it's not Maximum Ride. That's going to be further down the list, trust me. No, it's Middle School, the worst years of my life. Most generic kid against the society, against the school movie you could ever see in theaters nowadays. I couldn't believe how generic this movie was, how I didn't really feel for anything in this movie, any character, and how he pulls off these pranks is a little mind-boggling. And just, when you don't like a movie, when you're bored by it, you start looking at aspects that you're like, well, that doesn't make sense, and how did he do that, and what? When you don't like a movie and when you're bored by the movie, you can easily pick it apart and see all the flaws and the holes. Let's face it, almost every movie out there has at least some sort of flaw, some sort of plot hole. All that matters is it's entertaining enough, and for it to have enough positives to outweigh the plot holes and the negatives. There's no perfect movie out there that I have seen. Middle School, worst years of my life, didn't have enough positives to outweigh the negatives. Didn't have enough positives in this movie for me not to see the plot holes and the flaws and the things that make no sense in this movie. But I will say this, at least the twist in this movie is so bad that I was laughing and I was entertained by it. It's a twist that feels like it would be best in a M. Night Shyamalan movie, or even, heck, if this was a normal twist in a normal movie that was good and entertaining, I would appreciate this twist. Unfortunately, the movie's so bad that this twist is baffling, and I can't believe this is a twist, the kind of twist in this kind of movie. It is... holy crap. Watch my review if you don't care about spoilers. Alright, my number 13 is the most generic and cheaply made superhero movie since Fantastic Four. Actually, you know what? Fantastic Four is a masterpiece compared to this. It is Max Steel. Yeah, you didn't mishear me. This is only 13. This is 13. I found 12 movies worse than this, in my opinion. At least Max Steel has a decent premise in it. There's a few things that would work great in a nice sci-fi or a nice superhero movie. And I have to say, for a movie that looks like it's straight to DVD, for a movie that looks like it's so cheap I can't believe it's in movie theaters, for a movie like that, there's some CGI, while not the greatest, nothing to brag about, is good compared to any straight to DVD film I've ever seen. And yes, I know this did come out in theaters. It actually came out in one of the theaters in my hometown, and I'm still baffled by that. There must not have been anything else good that week. I can't remember what week it came out. I do remember seeing this with middle school, the same day. The characters are bland. The action is, there's barely any action in this movie. And that's fine if you want a low-budget superhero film, a contained superhero film that doesn't have a lot of action. You can still do that. Just make interesting characters. Don't make two-dimensional characters that you'd find in a generic superhero movie and then have less than average action. Then you don't really have anything to grasp onto. Yeah, like I said, if you hate Fantastic Four, or the newest incarnation of it, which was 2 years ago now, since this is 2017, I think it was 2015. Yeah, if you think that was crap, don't see Max Steel, unless you want Fantastic Four to feel like a masterpiece compared to something else. Don't see Max Steel. My number 12 is the first Madea movie I have ever seen. It is Boo, a Madea Halloween. I don't know how to judge this film because I've never seen any of the other Madea movies. So I don't know what classifies as normal Madea comedy. It just wasn't all that funny to me. And not only was it funny, all the unfunny jokes, because there are a few times I did laugh. I think there was at least 2 or 3 times. But of all the jokes that weren't funny, they were the ones that were repeated over and over and over. 6, 7, 8 times throughout the movie, each of these really bad jokes I didn't like were just repeated. And look, let's face it, if you don't like a joke in a movie, and it's repeated to the point where it feels like that's the only joke in the entire movie, you're going to have a miserable time watching it, and I had a miserable time watching it. The message in the film is so forced and so preachy and comes out of nowhere, it feels. And there's so many stupid things in the movie that, while if you like stupid things in a movie and you find that funny, you might find Boo and Madea Halloween so bad it's good. But for me, they're at a point on the stupidity level that was just too stupid for me to find funny. A person, a hacker, hacks into the lights of the house, the sink faucet, and a mirror above the sink faucet. He hacks into a mirror and a sink. What? Number 12, Boo, a Madea Halloween. I still got 11 movies to go. My number 11, The Disappointments Room. Now, I wasn't disappointed by this film because really I wasn't expecting all that much. When I saw the trailer, I'm like, oh, that is kind of intriguing, but I'm not really all that excited for it. I don't care if we miss it. And then I hear a bunch of reviews, and then my expectations are even lower. And so, yeah, it pretty much met my expectations when I saw this film. If the first scene in this movie alone doesn't make you cringe and make you feel like this is a bad movie, if you can make it after that scene, I congratulate you, because when that first scene popped up, I'm like, wow, I think I know what I'm getting into. And sure enough, I did. There was nothing about the characters that really made me think, wow, I want these characters to live throughout the movie. This also is another horror movie that tries to have psychological horror in it, that tries to show like, oh, is this real or is this not? And when you start realizing what's happening, it becomes predictable, and there's a few things in here where if it went the predictable route, it actually would have went in a stronger route than the movie actually did. When a movie doesn't take the predictable route, it's usually the better option, but it does it in a way where it's actually the worst option in this movie. Also, I wish the haunted house aspect, the spirits, the ghost aspect, would correlate with the actual horror of the movie, because, you know what, the psychological horror that the mother is going through, the thing in her past that is so horrible, is the most gut-wrenching thing about this film, because it is horrifying. Yeah, later in this movie you find out she accidentally killed her own child, her last child, her youngest child. She fell asleep on it, and that is horrifying. Because that was the time when I felt bad for the mother. And there's one scene that Kate Beckinsale has in this film that's actually really good. Like, she actually tried in this film. It's astounding. So that's why it's a little higher on my list than it probably should be. Yeah, if they would have connected her past a little bit more with the present horror of the film, and I feel like it tried to have some sort of connection, but it doesn't quite mesh. Also, there's a lot of flaws that I've noticed within the editing of the film and the positions of characters and the things they're holding, and they're no longer holding it in the same way the next time it cuts to them. There's a lot of flaws in the editing, and that's upon first view of this film. You're not supposed to notice that the first time you see a film. It should take 2 or 3 times before you notice that kind of stuff. Now, click and check out my worst 10 from 2016. Yes, I've got 10 worse films than Gods of Egypt, than Ghostbusters, than Disappointments Room, than 9 Lives. I've got 10 really, really bad films. Trust me. Well, some people might disagree with one of the 10, but I think it's unanimous that most people will find the other 9 to be really bad films.